Let's talk panel mode on our Sentro circular knitting machine. On the side, there's a button and you want the button up for P for panel. To start my cast on, I start at the third needle. You'll see how that's marked here with a line. And then for this panel, I'm going to end it at my 42nd needle here. You'll see I have it marked as a visual for me of where my starting and stopping point is. This is to make a smaller panel. The widest panel I will end at the 46th needle where the arrow is pointing here. So for any of the panels, I never use the 47th, 48th, first or second needle. If we're going to go with the largest panel, but you can always make your panels smaller as well. So we're going to do a smaller panel on this one. So this is great if you don't have the 40 needle circular knitting machine. You can make a panel that's 40 rows wide for like an infant size beanie hat. So we'll always start at our third needle. I do a long tail and we're going to hook it onto the bottom or underneath that third needle here for our cast on. Now we want the machine set, so we're going to crank forward. So we have it hooked under our needle, and then we're going to do it like a normal cast on. We're going to go over and under every other needle. When you go under a needle, you want to make sure the needle hooks the yarn and pulls it down into the machine. For this panel, I've ended at my 42nd needle. So I started at my number 3 needle and cast it on to my 42nd needle. And I have that marked. I just have a piece of Scotch tape with a Sharpie line for this project. Now we're going to put it all the way down, our yarn, into our yarn holder. We want it all the way in the front. It looks kind of like a little tongue. Make sure it's all the way in the front through the yarn holder and then the middle hole of our yarn tensioner. Now we're ready to crank backwards and do our first row. So as I start to crank backwards, you're going to see that I'm holding the yarn with my left hand. I don't just rely on the tension bar. I always use my left hand to create tension. And then you might have to help the yarn out a little bit, as it might get stuck on a needle. So now we're back to our third needle where we're going to start row 2. So you can see I have that marked. I just finished my row 1, so I'm going to put 1 on my row counter so I remember. Now to start our row 2, we ended at our third needle. It's going to go over this peg still though. So we have to go over the peg here. So we have it go over. Now we want to stop. And now it's going to go back over this same peg to start our second row. So it's going to go over again and it's going to catch onto that third needle. Now I'm cranking forward again and we're starting our row 2. And so we're going to crank forward and end at our 42nd needle marked here. Now this is where you might need to help it a little bit because you can see that loop is kind of locked onto that needle and it's not going down. It kind of jams up the machine. This happens on the first few rows. So a loom pick or a paper clip that you undo is really handy to make sure that loop goes down and seats onto those small 2 pegs so your needle can come up. Now we're done with our second row. We're going to start our row 3. Again, to start our row 3, we have to go over this big peg past our 42nd needle. Now we start cranking backwards. We don't want to do any of these other needles. We're going to start cranking backwards. It goes over that peg again, and it's going to catch on. I'm going to mark it. That's my next row. And now we're cranking out our third row. When we get back to our starting needle, again, you might have to help out these little loops. Make sure the loop is seated down onto those pegs. Now we're going to go over the peg, stop, and now we're going to start cranking forward, go over the peg again. We are now starting our next row. And then this is how you go back and forth, making as many rows or as long as a panel as you want. My biggest advice for panels is to go slow, and the problem areas for me is always that third needle and then whatever my last needle is. That's where I tend to drop the stitches when I'm not paying attention, and that loop I don't help it down to seat onto those 2 small pegs. Now to cast off, you want to make sure you have your yarn out of the yarn holder and you want to make it about the circumference of your machine. We're going to take our darning needle and we're going to take each loop off of the needle for the cast off. I like to do this on the right side of my yarn holder. Once the needle goes down and I'm cranking forward, I will pick up each loop individually. This works the best for me because those other loops around the other needles are more secured onto the machine, so I tend not to drop as many stitches this way, so I'm not having to redo them. So I just go loop by loop or needle by needle, cranking forward, and I pick up each loop off of those small pegs for the cast off until the fabric is completely removed from the machine. So thank you so much for all the comments and questions. I truly appreciate them. And then I also have linked in the video description below the full tutorial on how to make the infant size beanie hat on your 48 needle circulars knitting machine using panel mode. Happy crafting!